Okay, well, welcome to the final formal session for today's meeting. And we have we have a panel debate where the topic is hydrogen as a fuel. Now, everybody's talking about decarbonizing transport at the moment, and decarbonizing heavy transport in particular. We spent the whole day talking about that. We've talked about fuel cell solutions from ECAP. We've talked about battery solutions from Banker. We could have also talked about biofuel solutions and maybe even e-fuel solutions. In Denmark and Germany particularly, hydrogen is the flavor of the month to a huge extent. And I think the reason for this is that it offers a lot of promise. So you can make hydrogen from renewable sources. Hydrogen fuel cell vehicles apparently address a lot of the shortcomings of battery electric vehicles when it comes to refueling time and range. However, opinion is somewhat divided on the matter. And the feasibility and practicality of hydrogen fuel cell solutions are certainly worth debating. So what are the realistic CO2 savings we can get from fuel cells? What would the infrastructure requirements be and so forth? There are a million questions to answer. We're going to try and cover some of those today. So to do that, we've gathered a distinguished panel of four super professionals from across the whole spectrum of stakeholders within the industry. In alphabetical order, we have first Uffe Borup. Uffe is Chief Technology Officer at Everfuel. Everfuel makes and operates electrolyzers. Uffe is also the chairman of Brinkbranchen, the Danish hydrogen industry group. Second, we have Søren. Søren is head of future mobility at Concito. Concito being Denmark's green think tank. Joining us from the space station, joining us from Aalborg University is Brian Mathiesen. Brian is a professor of energy planning, and he researches in path to transitioning all of our energy to 100% renewables. And last but by no means least, we have Søren Petersen. Søren is a chief consultant at Dansk Transport and Logistik, which is an interest group for Danish
hauliers.
Yeah, hauliers and rail transport, I noted. Yeah. The debate participants have agreed to the following loose rules for this debate. In a moment, I'm going to ask them all to spend 3 or 4 minutes just giving their thoughts on the general topic of hydrogen as a fuel. They've not prepared any material. We just get their thoughts, and we'll do it in alphabetical order again. Once they've all given us their initial inputs, I'll then ask them if they have any immediate comments to what each other has said. Okay. And I'm going to certainly encourage you to be as challenging as you want to be. That might be enough to get the debate going. And if we get a debate going on those terms, then all well and good. If not, I do have a few topics that I'd also like us to come around. I noted we should try and talk about customer requirements. We should try and talk about the solutions that are out there. We should try and talk about infrastructure. And we should try and get around some of the policy and incentive issues that are there. I made a note of some questions that I will throw out if we need a question. These questions might be very provocative questions, but don't take them personally if they're a bit close to the bone. Yeah, we don't want to be too rigid with timing, but we will try and spend 15 minutes or so on each of these topics if we can. If we get to the end of 15 minutes, we may draw a line and return to the topic if we can do that. And of course, we will open up the audience to you, the audience, with questions and comments along the way. We want to debate. Okay, so let's try and if anybody in the audience has a point to make, raise your hand. We'll fold you in. We've also got quite a few people joining us in the Zoom meeting. Daniel will monitor that. We might get a question from them as well. So if we're ready to, does that make sense to you guys? Are you happy with that? And you can still hear us, Brian?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so let's start with Uffe. Take 3 or 4 minutes to tell us your thoughts on hydrogen as a fuel.
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Look forward to this. This debate here is going to be fun, I think, and hopefully interesting for everybody here. Looking at hydrogen as a fuel, actually, if we start from our energy system and the transition into a green, 100% green future, we need to electrify, all our sectors. So there's a lot of transition that needs to be done. Probably 2/3 of our energy needs today needs to be converted into something that is sourced from a renewable energy source. And there actually hydrogen comes in, you could say, as a supplement to the electricity system. We have the chemical system today, oil and gas and all these things. I'm sure some of the other panelists can talk more about that. Hydrogen is the most efficient chemical energy we can produce with green electricity. So it's quite clear that we're going to have a lot of green hydrogen in the energy system when we go forward and we have a fully transition system. There's going to be a lot of green hydrogen there. It's going to be needed for many purposes, industry, but also in transportation, because if we have cheap, clean energy, chemical energy in form of hydrogen, we can also put it on the transport sector. We see a lot of interest there from the high productivity sectors, where it's a little bit difficult to electrify with batteries today. We see, whenever you go to 2 shifts or more per day, start to see people are favoring this. You have very high fueling speed with hydrogen. You can fill your vehicle in 5 to 10 minutes, and you have, let's say, a more energy dense storage on the vehicle, so you can fly much further with hydrogen. That's a 3 main arguments for looking at it. The reason why I think this is going to be really a key element in transport is that we are going to be having access to a lot of green hydrogen in the future, because we need that, because we already have today problems with balancing the renewable energy production. Today, last year we curtailed between 3-4 terawatt hours because Germany wouldn't take it, through the trading system. So actually, it's already, that's electricity enough for between 700 megawatt and a gigawatt that we already today throw away. So we can produce a lot of hydrogen already today, and it can solve many of these problems. I'm not saying it's a silver bullet. We're going to be seeing both that, direct electrification makes a lot of sense, where you have infrastructure available for that and it works. You're going to have the other ones also to get all the way.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. So, over to you.
Yeah, so from Concito side, I come from transport, but we also look at other parts of transforming our economy, as you said. So looking more broadly, there's really good use for hydrogen, just not in transport as we see it. Maybe in air transport, and maybe made into ammonia in shipping. But we think that given that we need to see how can we minimize the climate impact or CO2 emissions from various activities, we see best use for hydrogen in the industry. It might, if we start using hydrogen in transport too early, where we don't have enough green electricity and we don't have enough green hydrogen, then actually the climate effect can be worse than continuing on diesel. So in that respect, we could see a marginal use for hydrogen eventually, but we might never need it in transport. Also because, as we see it, the transport sector will also need to transform some of the operations in order to accommodate this transformation. The bus sector has done it already. Some routes has been changed in order to better electrify, and the logistics sector will also be adjusting a bit, because otherwise we would need to find more space for renewable electricity, and finding all that space is hard already. So somebody needs to change something, and we think that until it has been demonstrated that the direct electrification is not really possible, then let's go for that. And then what cannot be changed in the coming few years or made electric, let's just wait and see. And it might be, 3 years ago, nobody would have expected that we were doing what we're doing now. So things are moving really fast. So to sum up, we see good use for hydrogen in transport, but that's for making the steel for the trucks, not for making the energy.
Also good.
Thanks, sir. Brian, over to you for 3 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me here on the panel today. I think we have an enormous task in front of us especially since on top of the climate crisis, we have an energy crisis in Europe, and it does actually mean something for how we should prioritize things. It puts an emphasis, I believe, on what we already know to be true, that hydrogen is really something that should be highly prioritized towards certain sectors and not every sector. I believe we have to have a full stop of gas consumption in Europe, including direct use of hydrogen. I cannot see that to be a good case in transport at all. And I also believe that we have to consider rather harshly what it is that we're doing at the moment in Europe. The latest developments have let's say, given rise to some fights within the European Commission. There's some strategies called Repower EU that has come out. And in that strategy, they are expanding the use of hydrogen for decarbonization from 10 million tons of hydrogen to 20 million tons, and a large part of this is supposed to be imported, and only part of the imported is actually green. Part of it is natural gas based. When we do that, that will put extra strain on our need to develop renewable energy in Europe. So I think we should keep to the Fit for 55 hydrogen ambition of around 10 million tons. That will be much more preferable. It is true that there are turbines being shut down, but I would really encourage everybody to understand what this problem is and not try to connect that to new use of, example, hydrogen or electricity. If we can use it, it will be much better to use it in electric trucks, electric buses, electric vehicles than to use it in an electrolysis plant. And it's also a rather technical administrative case that was mentioned here before with those turbines that is being shut down. It is something that will be solved, of course. Hydrogen is something that some people believe can become very cheap. I do not believe that because to produce green hydrogen, we need green electricity. And the S-curve for producing green electricity is already, a lot of that is already complete. We will see decreases in electricity costs from renewables in the future, 20% lower probably in compared to today from wind turbines, and even lower from PV. But there are conversion losses going to hydrogen, and then there are also conversion losses in using the hydrogen. And this means that there's simply let's say a physical some physical circumstances that means that hydrogen will be and will not be able to compete with direct electrification or batteries. And I think we need to prioritize this. After 2030, we need to further produce hydrogen to accelerate power to X for ships and for aviation mainly, and then for non-energy industry. As an example, ammonia, chemical products, medical products, these kind of things. Then there are some people that will say, what will we do with those trucks that we cannot decarbonize this side of 2030 without hydrogen or biogas? My message would be, do not decarbonize it.
Thanks, Brian. Words. Søren, over to you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to give the audience view. I think we have had a very interesting and good day today. So it's been very fine to be part of this. First of all, fuel cells and hydrogen as a solution is interesting, fascinating. But when we turn to Hauliers' perspective, well, it's more practical perspective, and some of these factors which will influence their decisions will be of more practical nature. I believe, as it has already been said several times today, that hydrogen and fuel cell trucks can actually solve some of the problems that are related to the electric or battery electric trucks at the moment. But when we're talking about adaptation in the industry among the hauliers, well, issues as prices, both on truck prices, but also hydrogen prices, of course, are crucial. TCO are crucial to the hauliers. This is an industry with very small margins, and I think that there's also where you have the explanation why many hauliers actually are very it's skeptical, sometimes even frightened about this green transition, because they know that a small step to the wrong side can mean a lot to their business. So they need certainty, and these TCOs are crucial. The same is infrastructure, where to fuel, what is the price for the truck when it's at the end, and so on. That's very important issues for us. But bearing that in mind, there are a lot of, I think, applications in the industry where fuel cell trucks give meaning. But what the percentage is hard to say, but we already seen some of the examples today, and I agree that they are there, and it's not easy for us to see that it can easily be electrified. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Thanks for that, gentlemen. We said we would give you the chance to just address a comment or two in each other's direction based on what you've heard. Would you like to do that before I throw a question in your direction? Uffe, of course, let's go.
Yeah, I think at least we are coming from two sides of this. It's good for debate at least. There is a few things I would try to maybe give an extra thought on, because if we look at actually the infrastructure problem for transportation, what we see today is that in many, if we go to Netherlands already, actually the grid operator down there has said to both producers and users that you cannot connect more to our grid because it's going to collapse if you do. So we are in kind of a situation where actually industry down there is starting to be limited in actually getting started on these transitions. And this is where we see hydrogen come in. We have a lot of pipelines already in Europe, so there's a lot of transmission capacity for energy that can be reutilized when we stop using the natural gas. We actually have a perfect grid there. We need some upgrade, but there is a lot of parallel pipes down through Europe that we can put hydrogen in. And we also need seasonal energy storage for crisis and stuff like this, so we need this chemical energy. And the last point I would say is that I agree actually with Brian that we should use the electricity first if we can. But what we see now these energy islands that we are building or are going to build, when you get over 100 kilometers out there, the transmission cost is going to be quite significant to transmit tens or hundreds of gigawatt on land. And you start to see actually now consortiums, they're proposing these hydrogen islands, because it only costs 10% in transmission costs to run it through a hydrogen pipeline compared to HVDC cable. So there are some aspects there you could say that I don't think I disagree with that we should use the electricity first. Of course we should, but we need hydrogen for many purposes. And I think also the transportation sector needs hydrogen to help decarbonize, because otherwise we're going to be waiting a very long time for Europe to build out grids. It's not going to happen within the time frame we need it.
Okay. So,
Just to follow up a bit on that, I think also it's great to produce hydrogen when, for example, if the TSO won't allow you to connect to the grid and reuse pipelines. But then why feed it into transport? There's plenty of uses in Germany for hydrogen, for example, for other uses. And regarding the hauliers, the good thing is that the hauliers will now soon get a price signal, at least here in Denmark, on road taxes, where from January 25 there will be 1.2 kroner per kilometer charge for trucks, but with a 70% rebate for non-emission trucks. So perhaps Mercedes can get some orders up until 25, and also, I mean, the Danish Climate Council has calculated that the price difference per kilometer between direct electrification and hydrogen is also about 1 kroner per kilometer. So I think hauliers, being rational people looking at TCO, will soon start planning for electrification. Of course, starting with the short routes, but then it will move fast.
Britt, you were nodding your head there. Is it to agree with Søren on that point?
Yeah, I think I want to just make some nuances in this a bit because I think we have to deal with each sector from each sector's viewpoint. And let's say we get what Søren describes here, this tax with that tax rebate. Then Søren's members, the truck owners, they will look at what kind of truck can we buy at what price, and where can we buy the fuel, and what kind of fuel can we buy. And the thing is that I'm not imagining these things. What is going to happen here is that those who can buy an electric truck, they will buy an electric truck. And yes, there can be bottlenecks in certain places from the grid side. Also in Denmark, very fewer places than in the Netherlands, because the Netherlands have a very weak electricity grid actually. But in any case, trucks are going to be parked in the same places they're usually parked. So this can be built out. And in any case, those who buy the trucks will first look at the cost of hopefully the total cost of ownership, which means that this is not something I'm imagining. It means that it's actually also going to be the case when those who are in the marketplace have to choose from different technologies. Should it be so that one of Søren's members says, we would like to decarbonize, we can afford to pay for a fuel cell truck, then that fuel cell will function as a range extender, because it will likely be that it will have a very large battery together with a fuel cell, or as large as possible at least, so that they can charge partly either while they're driving or while they're parked. Now, what kind of range extenders can we then imagine? Well, there are 3 types I would like to mention of range extenders. One of the types is a fuel cells based on hydrogen. The other type is a fuel cell based on methanol with onboard reforming to hydrogen. And the third one is simply a combustion engine. And if you look at those 3, you have to think about what the costs are, both in infrastructure and onboard storage. And here I'll make a little bet with you, and I'll bet that the fuel cell truck, the range extender fuel cell hydrogen truck, will be the one that loses out. And why is that? That's because to store hydrogen is a really expensive idea, also on board a truck. But to store methanol and either use it in a combustion engine or fuel cell is actually rather cheap. And it is so that the upstream cost for distributing hydrogen or distributing methanol are extremely different. Because if you want to distribute hydrogen, it is not easy to refurbish natural gas grids at all. That is hard, and it will require quite a lot of new grids. And if we want to use the natural gas grids, then we have to realize that we can't use it for natural gas anymore because they have to be refurbished. So that's also the case. And then we have to have hydrogen storage at the tank station, which is the expensive part. And here we come back to methanol. So methanol wins over hydrogen, in my opinion, here. And then you can say, what wins in the range extended truck? Is that the fuel cell with the methanol or the combustion engine? And here I would say most likely it will be an optimized combustion engine that will win, unless there are technical standards hindering that. Because in a truck, you drive a long way, and if it's a range extender, you can optimize a combustion engine so that the efficiency of the fuel cell is actually not a lot better than a combustion engine. So that means if you need a range extender, then probably it's a combustion engine. And if you need hydrogen, and I've been part of putting hydrogen on the agenda when nobody wanted to talk about this in Denmark, just to remind you of that, then we should use the hydrogen together with ammonia, together with carbon or nitrogen to create ammonia or methanol that can be used and where you can have much cheaper storages than hydrogen. Remind you also that hydrogen is a strong greenhouse gas, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't fully agree with these statements. I think if we look at the OEMs, some of them have strong development programs now for electrifying their drivetrain. Then you could say you actually becomes quite good setup. You know, that you have electric drivetrain that is very efficient, and then you source it with a battery, or you put on a range extender. If you have, you know, if you look at for the heavy duty hauling that we have through Europe, I think they need that. I think there's something that we don't need to forget is about the productivity. The productivity of the operator. It's extremely important that he can drive. You know, some of these trucks, they drive 300,000 kilometers per year. You know, they need to be quick out again. And if the, you know, this is where we'll give it a chance. I'll take Brian's bet and see. we can maybe look. You know, there's a timeline to this also. We can look at it in 2 years and in 5 years and 10 years. See what happens. You heard it here first.
But I didn't hear where you disagree with what I said.
Where I disagree is that you say that that the hydrogen storage is cannot be overcome. You know, this is
so
technologies will come down, and we see that actually what we pay to transmit today electricity is actually starting to become comparable to what we can with the mobile pipeline concept. We can actually, maybe if you look at it from a technical point of view, it should be cheaper to transmit electricity, but it's actually quite expensive these days.
No, transmission of hydrogen is extremely cheap, much cheaper than electricity. It's not the transmission that's the problem, it's the storage that's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, that's not what we see, that it's the storage that kills the fuel cell truck development. Not in scale. It needs to be scaled up. Price will come down.
Let me, sir. Let's make it a formal debate.
Yeah, it's just, Uffe, I'm quite curious because, as I understand, you're in the hydrogen business.
Yes.
Why is it important what it's used for?
Yeah.
No, I mean, we want to help people decarbonize in all sectors. So,
yeah, but why not start where?
We do. We are building a factory, hydrogen production facility, the first in Northern Europe that actually is going to supply a refinery.
Yeah,
and of course that helps because the vehicle's already there. We can help them make a dent into it. And of course, we can also look at the efficiency of that chain. It's not I mean, it's not the most efficient chain. We will get much more mileage out of putting it directly.
And the climate effect from putting more hydrogen into, for example, aviation fuel, is huge compared to basically everything else. So it's a really good place to start. Just do it more refineries before putting it into truck.
I'm almost not sleeping these days.
But would that involve adding hydrogen to the aviation fuel at the point of refining?
Yeah,
it would. Okay,
yeah, because it makes a cleaner burn, and then this effect from contrails is reduced. I mean, it's not counted into Denmark's emissions books, but it's there's a direct effect.
And I mean, we're full into that, and have big plans with the refinery to make sustainable fuels. Basically, of course, they need to find carbon sources that are sustainable as well, and then 10 years we'll have everything converted. I think that's a common plan.
But is it because you want to sell the fueling stations? Is that your target?
We don't make the fueling station, Brian. We operate them.
Okay.
Okay. Let's draw a line to that one for the time being. I suspect we'll come back to that a little later on. Let's just talk a little bit about customer requirements. So this is directed at you. In my fly-in, I mentioned that fuel cells are seen as a solution to the problem of fueling at range. Okay, so if you polled your members and asked them whether it was crucial for them to be able to fuel in 15 to 20 minutes, as promised by a fuel cell, or whether they could manage with that we heard today from the ECAP guys, or whether they could manage with the 1 hour megawatt charging that Morten Jensen told us about today, what would your customers, what would your members say?
Our members, what they say? Well, it's very different. They have all types of operations and applications in the industry, but there will be some in all of the groups. But of course, if megawatt charging will be a reality, it will mean a lot to the sector. But still, you have the prices. We already discussed that there is a major gap between prices at the depot when you have an agreement with the local supplier, or when you have to charge at stations or whatever outside. So and we also have the issue of price span during time. At the moment, we see very huge price span between electricity prices when they are cheap and when they are expensive. And it is also a fact that contributes to the uncertainty about electricity or battery electric vehicles, because how to calculate prices when you discuss with customers and so on, there you will probably, I suppose, have a more fixed and reliable price on the hydrogen that can actually be put into calculations and offers and so on.
Okay, so
yeah, and I think some of the fuel suppliers are already considering how to solve that, because I guess many hauliers already have in-house fuel, and now they also have in-house charging, but it's being supplied by for example, Shell or Oco, or who's, I mean, and some of those might want to do a business on providing a fixed price so that they take the risk if the haulier doesn't want to take it. But and I guess also, I mean, there will be a competition on lowering the prices for the public chargers, and I think also, as we've seen for the cars, there'll be some heavy support for putting up, I mean, making the investment in the chargers so that the cost of actually operating them can be kept at a lower level. And actually, that's also how we recommend subsidizing hydrogen or PTX production. Subsidize the investment so that you're not tempted to run when you shouldn't, if we subsidize operation.
But I think this actually illustrates again the dilemma that we have at the moment. That there are lots of questions, a lot of assumptions, curves going up and down, and so on. And of course, we would at any point of time encourage our members, of course, to make the rational choice based on what information is available. And I think that based on the information available at the moment, we cannot exclude hydrogen as a solution. We have problems with the hydrogen solution, where hydrogen is a good solution, and that's our point at the moment. It's possible that things are evolving and developed and so on, and that we find solutions for some of these challenges described. But where we stand right now it's not a point in time where you can exclude hydrogen and fuel cell, in my point of view. So
it's just important to be precise about the solution, what problem it is the solution for, because if it's the solution, for example, being allowed to go into a non-emission zone in a city, and you cannot see it done by a battery electric vehicle, then it might be relevant. But if the haulier wants to do it because the haulier wants to do something positive for the climate, then it's probably not the best solution until we have decarbonized the whole electricity system, decarbonized use of hydrogen in the industry, and so on.
Yeah, I agree. Yes.
Ria?
No, I completely agree with Søren here, but it does mean that what I said before, yeah, there's two Sørens, but both of them. In some sense, you're confirming what I said earlier. What should you do in the transport sector if you can't electrify and buy an electric truck? Well, not much. You have to wait until the technology is ready. And I completely agree with Søren, and this is the point I'm trying to make as well, Søren Have, where he says that hydrogen needs to be prioritized for those sectors that use it directly already first. And there are heaps of that. There's so large a demand, you can't believe it. And especially in these times where we have an energy crisis, we can't afford to replace even 5% of the truck fuel demand in Europe with hydrogen. It is simply not a very good idea. But we should start to develop some of the hydrogen production infrastructure and also those chemical synthesis where we can make methanol and ammonia. And that is already being done. But I would also say the plants that we have now are fine. We should not make new plants. We should have experience with what is going on. And also most likely it will be required to decarbonize and enhance the energy security of Europe in other sectors this side of 2028, 2027. So the things have changed, not in the sense that electrification has always been a good idea, but I would say the acceleration rate of producing electrofuels and Power-to-X and producing hydrogen has to be slower due to this energy crisis that we are in than expected, unfortunately.
Yes, Søren.
Just to give an idea about the need for energy, Brian, you mentioned that there's been an increase of vision from 10 to 20 I don't know, million tons of hydrogen. So just for comparison, the amount of added need for renewable energy roughly is the same as what was declared in Esbjerg as a new increased target. And that was just for the increased ambition in hydrogen. So it's huge energy use that is being
just.
Yeah, if you make a comment to that, and then we'll open up the floor
that's
to.
fine. I mean, just a last comment, because it's also, because we also listen a lot to the OEMs of these, if we're talking about trucks today. I mean, I think we agree on many other aspects of hydrogen. It's fine. If we talk about trucks, we don't seem to be aligned. But actually, when you're listening to Mercedes and some of the other developers, they also see competition between, the truck and we have to electrify the personal transportation sector. And actually today, the prices on the battery is driven up by the personal transportation sector for the cars. So actually today they need, they are actually in a place where it's hard to electrify these trucks, because you need maybe 1,000 kilowatt hours at least to have, for a lot of the operation, maybe even more, maybe 1,500 you need. And so it's like 20 cars. You can have either electrify 20 cars, or you can electrify one truck. And I think when the OEMs, they look at this and say, okay, these prices are going up on materials for batteries, we're going to lose out that. You create more value by producing. You can get more profit by selling 20 cars than selling one truck. So there's also some dynamics in that, that we say, why would we exclude, hydrogen? Because actually this solves some of these problems.
Can you put in all the dynamics into that equation you're describing there? Because otherwise it's irresponsible. When you produce hydrogen for a truck instead of using electricity for a truck, there's all of the upstream costs as well, putting pressure on transmission grids in Europe, and also putting pressure on building out renewables. That also has material. There's a reason why we say energy efficiency first in Europe, which is that we need to save on also renewable energy, and that is also heavily affected in the current situation.
Yeah, I think we're maybe calculating in two different ways, Brian, because we are not going to get all these renewables without the hydrogen, because we need to. We cannot run whole Europe on fluctuating energy. We need to put a big portion of that renewable has to go into some kind of chemical storage.
Okay, I need to correct you here. We need electrolysis to balance the system at a certain point. This is what we have worked with since 2010, 11, 12, what we call smart energy systems. But we don't need any more than 5 or 10 million tons of hydrogen before 2030 in Europe to do that. We do not. And then you can say it also depends on where we place new renewables. Are we able to distribute it or not? And that's where it becomes hard with building out renewables and expanding the electricity demand for electrification, but also for hydrogen production.
Okay, let me just take a pause.
That's right.
We have plenty more to get around, and it's fantastic and interesting input, I must say. Would anyone in the audience like to put a question or make a comment to what we've heard so far? Should we let them loose on another topic? Anybody? Okay, let's try the next one. Uffe, I did a little bit of. We've been looking at this because of the truck we made. You mentioned a minute ago that in Holland, hydrogen has a role to play, a big role to play, because I think in effect what you're saying is the electricity grid is full. Okay. Where does the hydrogen come from to help Holland if their energy grid is full?
Well, it's going to be, in Holland, actually, they already have a hydrogen network because they use it for the chemical sector. Today, it's all gray hydrogen. So they'll have a big problem already to actually start producing some green hydrogen put into this pipeline. Right. And this is what they will connect their offshore wind. Yeah. Well, actually on sea land there, they're building out massively electrolyzer capacity, and will start greening up that hydrogen grid that they have already. And they also have plans to use that for, of course, first of all, to decarbonize all those chemical sectors that they have plenty of down there. Right. But they also see other uses for it. Okay. So it sounds like they're doing what
Søren is
Yeah, they
working on
are
this.
doing that, but of course, this hydrogen will also be available for any purpose. You know, if you can, if there's surplus hydrogen, you can use it for transportation, or you can use it to. I mean, it's not the best idea to use it to heat your home, so you should use it in a heat pump. You know, but you can. I mean, then and we'll see. There's a lot of plants down there, and of course, there is also possibility. I mean, EU is working on building up a connecting transmission lines, because the other big sectors, of course, oil and other big industrial areas, where to push out the fossil.
Okay, so they're taking Søren's route, and that seems to be working for them.
Yeah, I mean, but they also need to decarbonize, because they have a huge NOx issue in Netherlands. So they need zero emission technology, and they cannot put more chargers on the grid.
Okay.
So that's why we're building out bus stations for hydrogen. It's the only way they can expand. They'll build construction projects. It's something that is also a bit harder to electrify, because you don't have infrastructure where you can bring in hydrogen. So I'm not saying, we're not talking silver bullets here. We're talking about giving it space for the technologies that can actually help solve the problems.
No, I think it's a bit hard to it might be a bit hard to explain this to everybody, but I think what the Netherlands is doing is something that is not necessarily thought completely through, because in effect you can if you want to deal with local air pollution, there are several ways to do that, and there are also possibilities to have trucks driving on methanol, where you have much lower emissions than trucks using diesel. And in this case, you would not need this to build out the hydrogen infrastructure. You would actually be able to use parts of the existing one. You could even you can even blend in methanol as part of or DME as part of the fleet fuels, without the industry having to do anything. So I think this is the solution described here is going to be a niche solution, and they're going to find out that it might not be the best idea at some point.
A question for you, sir. When we look at, if I look at Volkswagen's website, I can find a note saying that, this is changing the subject somewhat here, but if I look at Volkswagen's website, I'll see a note saying that from Volkswagen themselves, saying that fuel cells for passenger vehicles will never happen. Okay, and now here we're talking about fuel cells for trucks. What is so different about the truck world and the transport world that means that fuel cells would be part of that mix, when it appears that the passenger market is totally given up on?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of differences, of course. The long haul, the average range driven, of course, weight, load, that's it. The importance of fast fueling is also extremely important, and if you experience the industry, you will sometimes be very puzzled about how much this actually means. These few minutes perhaps you can spare, or what. When you add that together, it's actually important in a business which is so characterized by tough competition as this industry, the transportation industry is. So that's actually the case. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. But for passenger cars,
yes,
nobody makes as far as I know, there aren't many passenger fuel cell vehicles in the market at the moment.
No.
And if the benefits were available from fuel cells, wouldn't they be somehow percolating into the passenger car market? Shouldn't there be shouldn't every car company also have a fuel cell alternative? So maybe I'll look, there's a fuel cell Mercedes that's available in a few years' time. They're in operation at the moment. He also has an e-Actros he can sell us today. I drive an ID3, you drive an ID4. We can't get a Volkswagen fuel cell car. Uffe, maybe you can chip in on that. Why is it that the ship has sailed apparently in passenger cars, but there's still life in the old dog yet for trucks?
I think, I mean, if you look at Volkswagen, they also were in a very painful place, so they needed to put all their resources and to make a technology choice, basically just to not lose out. So I think if you look at the group there, and if we look at the personal passenger car market, it's again, you know, it's probably a very big portion of that will work fine with electric vehicles, but there is also an application for fuel cell in small vehicles as well. We see that in taxis and vans, high productivity areas, that actually they need these vehicles to drive zero emission in cities. We'll see. I mean, it's again, I think when you develop a new generation of vehicles, you need to focus on a core segment of the market. It's not a car that works for everything. So if you look at I mean, we should forbid them, but you know, if people want to drive around in SUVs, pull a camper or something, you know, or the horse you need to drive to Madrid, probably you'll be happy with the fuel cell version of it. So I think it will be a niche market for fuel cells in passenger cars.
So, what would you comment to that?
No, I think also, I mean, it's very much to do with the cost. I mean, fuel cell cars are just more expensive, and battery and charging has come down so fast. So I think most people now have understood that if they buy a new EV right now, I mean, it can charge faster than they can go and buy a cup of coffee, basically. So the issue is kind of and that's the same for trucks, is that can you be certain that you can actually get a charger and so on. So I think I mean, it would be helpful for the hauliers and for the industry as such if we could have some, like it's been done in Sweden, where you have a test corridor where actually you set up, you make some agreements with some shippers and some hauliers and some charging operators, where you actually test large-scale truck charging and for example, I guess, I mean, at some point you would also want to book a charging spot and in order also to combine it with the rest that the driver needs to be taking. So and again, our view is that the industry will be changing. I mean, transport will also be more expensive. It's been basically too cheap in recent years. So there's been a lot of transport where one could consider, well, was that really needed? But now we can see there's a driver shortage, there are higher taxes coming in, and now energy cost will also go up. So also the amount of transport will decrease, or at least flatten.
Any questions before? Anyone want to make a comment? No? Yes, sir.
Would be nice.
We were talking about the grid earlier.
Yeah.
And Holland is challenging on, but why are they not just upgrading their grid? Is that we have the technology now, because we already have a grid. Can we just beef it up to be able to handle the load now and in the future?
It sounds like an infrastructure question, Brian. The question was, can Holland not just beef up the grid? And I guess the implication was, would we have the potential to do that here in Denmark as well? So
yes.
What are the challenges with just beefing up a grid?
Well, I'll start with answering, but it seems that Uffe has a more understanding than I do of this, so he can maybe supplement. But in my opinion, hydrogen, or not hydrogen, sorry, the Netherlands has a major problem here. You have to realize the Netherlands has had a system where they have heated their houses with natural gas, and they've also used natural gas for cooking. Now, this means that in many cases, well, that's a lower limit, of course, but in some cases at the household level, you have 1,000 kilowatt available. And, or no, 1 kilowatt available, sorry. which means it's equivalent to you turning on your oven or turning on a vacuum cleaner or turning on a boiler. Of course, that is the lower case, but in many cases, you're not able to have the same peaks as we can out there in, let's say, in the outer parts of the system. Now, that is the case for the outer part of the system. I do not believe it's necessarily the case when you then go up into the higher voltage, so 135 kilowatt systems. And this is where I don't believe in that it's not possible to have fast charging or to have, especially for trucks, charging stations. Now, if we look more broad again on in those ends of the electricity grid in the Netherlands, why are they not building that out? Well, I would say that is going to be so extremely expensive, you can't believe it. And this is also why district heating in the Netherlands is an extremely good case, because actually to charge a car on an existing grid, an electric car, is not a big game changer. Because if you have an infrastructure where you charge at the right times, even a lower capacity can function in many cases. But if you put on top of the existing electricity demand, a heat demand, that is maybe twice the electricity demand, and you imagine that that heat demand is placed in the winter time, meaning that the peaks are extremely high, then the grid breaks completely down. So the heating sector in Europe is key to understand that is significantly different from the structure of electricity demands for electric vehicles. I think in the Netherlands, they need to build out the electricity grid to deal with personal electric vehicles. I am not convinced that they can't have charging stations for trucks in the higher voltage parts, or medium voltage, we should call them, parts of the electricity grid, but maybe Uffe knows this better. And the more they can do to avoid expanding the electricity grid, the cheaper it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, Brian, with that, that they have some issues there. I think if you look, there is also, if you look at Rotterdam, it's a massive, we have, I think, 10,000 trucks coming in, over 9,000 trucks coming in over the border between Denmark and Germany every day. But in Rotterdam, they're basically supplying half of Europe with containers. So it's massive. So of course, the infrastructure is not only, there, it's the whole way. So and how that plays out, I think it's about using all the tools in the toolbox also, because we know building out electrical infrastructure it takes a long time, because whether you dig it down or you have the overhead lines have its own issue. So it's also about the scale of this problem here, I think, where we need to go to chemical energy for some of it, because otherwise we won't succeed.
Right, we have a few minutes to go. I wanted to turn the topic onto policy and incentives and how to get moving. And if we talked about electrifying heavy transport to the right extent, and I think there's a broad agreement here that there's a case can be made for a mix, and we need to get to a point there's a future point where there will be a balance of some kind. What is the right way to move that ball as quickly as possible? Because I get a feeling that a lot of decisions are not made because there's perhaps some confusion about will fuel cells be viable? Will the carbon pricing come in? Will there be sufficient energy on the grid? And from speaking to one of the gentlemen that was here earlier on today, I got a very clear impression that he would do nothing until there was a very clear way forward. But we do seem to get into sort of a chicken and egg type situation on what customers need and what's possible to supply. So what would be I'll start with you here, Søren, because you're sort of closely on the influencer side, on the in your capacity to think tank.
Yeah.
What would be the right way forward in your view?
So we see a need for both stick and carrot. I mentioned the stick earlier being the road tax, having a large CO2 rebate. And a good carrot could be an option for investment window for 2, 3, 4 years, where hauliers, for example, could make, multiple, more than 100% depreciation of investments in for example, electric trucks. I think that could be a good approach to set aside some billions for that in the coming years. Now, there was an opportunity to take the billions from the hybrid tax on the personal vehicles, but that was just missed yesterday, it seems, unfortunately. But it could. There's been, and I guess Søren, you can elaborate on that, but it's been a fair point from the haulier side that why should hauliers pay to make electric personal cars cheaper by paying a road tax? Yeah, I think that's a fair point. So maybe it's been better to been scrapping the hybrid rebate and then using that kind of revenue for giving a rebate to the hauliers instead.
Yes, that's for sure. But what's important to us, we certainly acknowledge that there is a need for incentive, of course. The technology is not ready for a natural conversion. The customers don't want to buy extra for transport. So incentives are needed. Perhaps it will probably be a bit strange for an industry to say we would like to have a lot of levies, but when we're talking about the coming mileage system, it's important for us that it affects everyone. We have a lot of international competition in this industry, so it's very important that it also affects foreign transport companies, and it does. But to overcome the lack of competitiveness of battery electric trucks at the moment, we would also like to see a support scheme from the Danish government if they want us to convert in the short run. It is needed in our point of view, and it's completely correct what Søren Head is saying about this strange support to the hybrid cars, which actually turned out not to be as green as assumed. And it's just one example of one of these dilemmas in the political regulation of this issue, that politicians also, of course, take voter groups size and relative size into account and so on. And in that picture, well, hauliers, well, is a smaller group, and that's probably one of the reasons why.
Okay. What would your suggestion?
Yeah, I think, it's, if you look at all technology developments, you need to work with the market. So there needs to be an initial market to actually create a demand for these things. So on this, I think that's why also we saw the very nice presentation before, that in Germany things start to happen now, because we have both for electric and for fuel cell vehicles, commercial vehicles in Germany. There is basically a method where the government will cover 80 to 90% of the difference. And this, of course, creates a space for technology to start to get out to work, because we cannot go directly from laboratory and then into full-scale operation. It's never happened. So you need to do steps and have the market also actually to mature these technologies, because it's not going to work the first time. There's going to be an issue. We need mature technology at the end. So it's very good to invest in these things, and we can build industry along the way. And I think in Denmark, there is some focus on the power to X side of it, but maybe there's not actually very little focus on helping industry build out in the vehicle side. So it's something we could do much more, and also get some knowledge work here in Europe, or in Denmark.
Before we come deeper in, we hear a lot in Denmark about the potential for power to X to be the next export eventually, a possibility for massive exports of something. When we hear that, are they talking exporting hydrogen, or are we talking about exporting hydrogen trucks, fuel cells technology? Where might that? We'll start with you on that one, Brian. Yeah, the Dansk export aventure on the basis of hydrogen economy. What are your views on that?
So my opinion here is that I think that we have clearly shown that in our ambitious visions we are forerunner. I would say we have the largest ambition actually on Power-to-X in Europe, and I think we have to stop here because we need those plants to work, and we need some experience with those plants. And I actually, in this closed room, I will also say I'm worried that we have done it too fast because they needed to learn from each other before we decided the next one. But now we have what we have, and we have maybe around 5 or 6 gigawatts that will be commissioned if also the contracts are signed. We will then hopefully be an exporter of different products, maybe also hydrogen. I'm not sure that we will, because northern Germany has so much wind, and Germany has such a high hydrogen demand that I think it's not feasible for us to build out that infrastructure yet. I would say we need to focus on ammonia and different hydrocarbons. Our export adventure will be to produce those, of course. They will be more expensive than the existing fuels. So imagine ammonia replacing fertilizers from natural gas. That would be more expensive. Imagine that we make methanol or ammonia for ships. That will be more expensive than bunker fuel or fuel. Imagine we are able to create jet fuel. That will certainly be more expensive than fossil jet fuel. So we will get markets for this because we want to create this technology and we want to use this. That is clear. We'll have some blend-in mandates to secure that, and there'll be some companies, because of their image, they would like to use this and pay that little extra, and that's fine. And then we can build out also partly that, of course, but there's a limit to that, and that limit is maybe based on our renewable energy potential. But we have modeled, actually I'm sitting looking at it right now, we have modeled all 27 countries in Europe and also the UK, and we can see Germany has a problem with resources, and it's a good idea that we help them with electrofuels and different kind of hydrocarbons for their production, but also for their planes. And so I think we can be an exporter of fuels as well. But the main export will be different. The main export will be that because we're doing this, we will have an industry where we can design these, we can operate these, and we can produce these. We have the know-how to do that. And we will get some bad experiences and some good experiences. And we can use that to export this technology. And all of that those hydrocarbons, hydrogen, ammonia that we can produce, you can times that with 1,000 or something if we look at the global market. And that's the real potential here. I also want to mention, just to bring the loop back to what I started with saying here, that this is not going to be driven by physics, like I said with the electric trucks winning over fuel cell trucks. This is going to be winning if we want to decarbonize globally, because then we will accept those losses that will be in the energy system due to creating these fuels. We'll accept it in order to keep fossil fuels in the ground. But it won't be a winner technology. It won't be reduced in price so that it can compete. It has to be a political choice to open the marketplace for that. But in that case, if that happens in even parts of the globe, then the market potential is vast here.
4:30, time's gone. And let me just throw it out to the audience one more time. Anyone would like to make a comment or ask a question while we have the panel? Yeah. Yes.
When it comes to end of life, how do these two compare? The fuel cell versus the battery? Recycling.
Okay, just in case Brian didn't hear that, the question is end of life for fuel cell solutions and battery electric solutions. How do the two compare? Uffe, would you like to have a swing at that?
Well, I mean, I think it's really, really important that we find ways to recycle all the materials that we use for these vehicles. Today, you use quite a bit more material to create a truck with a certain range in the battery side compared to the fuel cell, but none of them are perfect. They are actually both difficult to take apart again. And then, of course, this is a major challenge that needs to be solved. People are working on it. You know, that you can pull the fibers out, the carbon fibers out of the hydrogen storage. This is being worked on, but also taking the battery apart is a challenge, because it's still cheaper to buy new lithium than pulling it out of the battery. But of course, this has to happen. Recycling. I think in general we have less use of material in the fuel cell truck than in the battery. But they both need to be recycled.
Sounds like a business opportunity. So how did you want to say?
Yeah, I don't know much about the fuel cell part, but the good thing about the battery trucks is that compared to the amount of battery capacity needed for the personal cars, it's actually much less. People would think it's the other way around, but actually it's because trucks just run more and there are few trucks.
Use them more.
Yeah, so actually, and there's, I mean, the reuse industry of batteries is starting now, and right now they don't have much to reuse, but it will happen quickly. So the trucking industry can also use the same benefits or reuse factories as all the personal cars, and so keep resource usage down that way.
That might be the last word we have. Anybody else with more comments? Anybody on the panel like to make something on your mind you didn't get to say while you while you have the chance?
Just a comment on this recycling bit. I mean, this is I think it's funny to hear these arguments for fuel cells. I mean, they're not here. We don't have the problem. There's no drive for recycling that. There's a huge drive for recycling batteries. And where is that drive? Is in the electric vehicles. And where is this going to be defined? It's going to be defined based on what we're doing in the personal light duty vehicle cars. That's how these standards are going to be defined. And here there's no focus on, well, there is maybe a slight focus on fuel cells, but there's a huge focus on recycling of batteries and materials for batteries. And trust me, the problems with climate change are much more vast than the problems with recycling here.
Right. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. Will you come in the back? Oh, you just adjusted me. I think I think that'll be the last word then, Brian. Yeah. So I think we'll thanks to Søren Hill, thanks to Søren Petersen, thanks to Borup, thanks to Brian up in Aalborg. I was hoping, Brian, those Gantt charts behind you might have been how to decarbonize transport in the next 3 years, but that's got to be. I'll be looking closer to see what they are.
It's still on the table.
I couldn't quite get that one there. So, but let's give the guys a round of applause. If you want to disconnect, we'll say tak for den gang.
Tak for det. Yeah, thank you. Here from Copenhagen. Bye.
Thanks very much.
See you, Brian.
Very good. Gentlemen, if you
Nice to see you.
Rasmus, if you want to come up and take the concluding remarks, if you can summarize everything you've heard today, then that'd be very impressive. So over to you.
I don't think I want to add something to the debate, but I do want to thank everybody for coming today and to celebrate with us our new facilities here. We are very happy to finally be able to show, okay, now we have some capacity, now we have some momentum, now we have some traction, and it's been great to see so many interested people and so many good talks going on. Because regardless if it's fuel cell or it's battery, electric or whatever, there are business opportunities here, and we are here to exploit them. You have to remember that this area where we are in right now is known for stuff like this. I mean, it was started with the refrigeration in the 30s, when that was like the new cell phones, and the Sønderborg area has grown a whole industry about around that, and I can see also a lot of stuff going on, not just only with this company, but there's a lot of interesting startups in Sønderborg interested in power electronics, making things move electrically instead of on fossil fuels. So we are happy to have been able to share that with you today. I know that some of you are anxious to go, and a lot of you will be staying for dinner, some even overnight. We are looking forward to entertaining you for a few hours left. But in the meantime, take the opportunity to do the last networking and get a soda or whatever. And we bid you farewell and thank you.